Good morning, Your Holiness. So wonderful to see you, Your Holiness. I hope you're feeling well and all is good. We miss you. We miss seeing you in person.
Thank you. Thank you.
Your Holiness, it's been 20 years since our meeting in Dharamsala on destructive emotions. And that was a meeting that we feel changed the field of science in which we work. And you gave us many inspiring suggestions, and you requested certain kinds of investigation. And there has been much progress over the last 20 years. Before that time, Your Holiness, there was no investigation of the effects of mind training on emotion. And today, there are literally hundreds of scientific studies that have been focused on the effects of mind training on different aspects of emotion. And we can trace that to this Mind and Life meeting in 2000 in Dharamsala. And yet there's still so much we don't know, as you often remind us, Your Holiness, when it comes to Western psychology and neuroscience. Our understanding of the mind is very small. So we have many questions. So I will begin this evening and ask Your Holiness, in Western psychology and in neuroscience, we use the term well-being, which means genuine happiness. Genuine happiness has been described in different ways, although there is a lack of agreement on what the key factors are that make up genuine happiness. And so the question that we have is, Your Holiness, what are the key elements of genuine happiness?
Happiness, very much so related with our emotion, part of emotion. So the emotion, there are many causes. Although environment, external things also effect, but mainly our own mental state. Mental state, calm, peace, the surrounding difficult sort of situation doesn't matter, not much disturb. So mind is very, very important. And then one good thing is mind can train. Through training, those destructive emotions try to reduce. Constructive emotion can increase. Positive emotion, very much based on reason. Negative emotion, just emotion, no reason. So long run, you see, through training, you see, our mind emotion can change. All those destructive emotion can reduce. Finally, can eliminate the positive emotion, such as the Sanskrit word karuna, compassion. You see, we can develop infinite way. Some scientists say that we are social animal. So any social animal is some kind of, by nature, say, the society, the group is basis of your own life. So therefore, any social animal, some kind of sense of concern of their own group. So we human being, social animal, obviously from birth, you see, our life entirely depends on mother's affection and family affection. So we all, by nature, since, you see, our own sort of also the life very much depend on your own group. So you have to take serious concern about the group which your life entirely depend. Looking from that way, we should be more compassionate. Compassion should not consider something religious thing. Is it related with the society, the humanity, like that?
Thank you for that beautiful teaching. When you've used the term destructive emotions in what you've said, when we first had this meeting 20 years ago, you yourself requested specifically that we talk about destructive emotions. When psychologists think of what makes an emotion destructive, they say it's when it leads someone to harm themselves or another person. In the meeting, though, another standard came up. It was emotion was destructive when it distorts our perception or disturbs our peace of mind. Your Holiness, my question for you is, what do you think makes an emotion destructive?
그래서
녀몽 타는데 destructive 세조와 네베릭진 세지. 그 녀몽이야 녀몽 destructive 세조와 destructive emotions 네베릭진 그 녀몽 세대. That's so what the any 네베릭진 차에디 유라 친줄로도 통해 차네 숨고요래 유라 친줄로도 통하다 아니 수수 샘기 시대의 초바체 돈에 공부시기요나 야고 용초도 끼요는데가 그 첼레리아 아니 시안을 내버체다 랑을 내버체기 자기 연구요 인자 단 destructive 세대리아 공부한데 시기요나스 emotion
그래서 미점도 마세베 소샤 튼두 순절로 지고 대원되어도 동해 민도 스타리
characterization of a particular state of mind as a destructive or constructive really has to be understood in relation to our basic disposition of a sentient creature. And it's not something just we human beings have, but all sentient beings have this natural the drive to seek happiness and wanting to avoid suffering. So anything that leads to that is contrary to this disposition can be characterized as destructive in a broad sense. And when it comes to our disposition of wanting to be happy and not wanting to suffer, this is something that we don't have to logically prove. It's a fundamental fact of a sentient creature, not just us, even animals, and particularly this, social creatures. And we know, for example, like many of the more constructive states of mind are related to our social nature, because they have to do with more, harmonious relationship with your social members of the social group. So in human relationship also, we see many of those states of mind that tend to be more constructive are the ones that promote that kind of relationship and social life. So that's one really way of talking about this. And this also reminds me of my wish when I talk about these things to really couch them more in secular terms, secular universal terms than religious or Buddhist, specifically Buddhist terms. And the importance of that is then we will develop a language that will be more universal, that can be brought into the school setting and education system. And I really feel that this emphasis on appreciating the social nature of human beings and what are the specific constructive states of mind and qualities that can be important for living a good social happy life really should be introduced from a very small age. so that they become part of an education curriculum. And I normally speak of emotional hygiene because everybody takes care of their physical health and physical hygiene. So something like emotional hygiene really needs to be brought into the school system, education system.
And umanjugwe chigdi dum debuchig yagodo gade the kongju seveina ene miduk susu cheje taba member ji.
So and also as part of this education should really include bringing common sense in a very powerful way, and demonstrating how the destructive aspects of some of these emotions can manifest and destroy relationship. There's a beautiful lines where Chandrakriti, in extolling the virtues of patience and forbearance, he gives the example of how when it's opposite, like anger and hatred takes over, how physical behavior and it changes. And he talks about how, when strong anger arises, even your face assumes an ugly demeanor. So even though you might have prepared yourself to go out and looking really good, but if you're angry, your angry face with the frown and everything makes you look ugly and unappealing. And even if you force yourself to smile when you are angry, the smile comes out as some form of a pretense or a sarcastic smile. So, and then of course, anger immediately destroys friendship and relationship and so on. And patience and forbearance sometimes may be more challenging because, sometimes adopting patience and forbearance involves putting up with certain hardships. But the payoff is really great because those who are able to bring patience and forbearance and, rooted in compassion, they have a greater sense of ease, they have more joy, they are more fun to be with. People like being around them. So those are really, common sense. Of course, Chandrakriti is talking in a Buddhist text, but these are really common sense. And these really need to be part of the secular education, promoting the values of these constructive emotions.
So
another important fact that Chandrakriti brings out is how when anger arises, it really robs us of our ability to be discerning. So because it really takes away that, the sort of the cognitive ability to discern what is the right action to take in a given situation. And so what this suggests is among the various emotions, anger is the one that has the most destabilizing and disturbing effect. Attachment from the Buddhist point of view is seen as belonging to a more destructive quality of emotion. But if you compare attachment to anger, attachment does not disturb us that much as anger does. Anger really shakes us from our equilibrium. So I think this fact of how anger robs us of our ability to be discerning is again an important attribute that needs to be we need to reflect upon.
Yeah, these are extremely interesting and important issues for us to consider. And this notion that anger robs us of discernment is, I think, very important to bring to modern scientific investigation. And so this is extremely helpful, Your Holiness. I'd like to ask a question now that's a little different. There are programs that train people to act in a compassionate way. For example, training people to volunteer to tutor children in schools. There are programs like this in many different parts of the world. But these programs do not help to train the mind of these volunteers. There are other approaches that train the mind, but do not teach people to apply this training in the world. So my question is there a balance a proper balance, a best balance between these approaches?
다 대단 가라서 령아 이승신 시기열이 다
In the Tibetan and Buddhist language, we speak of the three doors of our action: the body, speech, and mind. And these are the three avenues through which we interact and engage with the world. But out of these three, the most important one is really the mind, because if we are able to transform the mind, if we are able to bring really a conviction in the value of compassion, empathy, concern for others, at the level of changing the mindset, of the child, then action of helping behavior, restraining from harmful words and harsh words, and trying to harm others, these restraints will come naturally. So I think that between the three, the speech, body, speech, and mind, the emphasis really has to be on the mind, on the mental level. And in any case, when we are talking about bringing the education of the heart, we are talking about the qualities of the heart, like loving kindness, empathy, affection, kindness, and so on. So here already we are talking about qualities of the mind, and those qualities of the mind has to be cultivated with an approach that prioritizes mental training.
tundu스 지 깨자야 나로리야 작업 지 가소래.
So if we look at the three doors of our action, body, speech, and mind, at the level of body, of course we can imagine or understand certain types of bodily action which has completely neutral, morally neutral action, and that may not require even a conscious intention, something that just body kind of a mechanical motion of the body. But compared to body, speech is way more sophisticated, because human speech, if we compare to the speech of animals, the birds, they sing a lot, but we can see that when there is a danger, there's issue sounds that are particular kind. When they are trying to attract mates, they are issuing sounds in a particular way. So there are some variations which are important part of their life, but compared to human repertoire of speech, the animal's speech is actually quite limited. But humans have such a rich repertoire of speech that even though if we are trying to hurt someone, even though we may not use harsh words, and the words that we're using sound good, but we can say things in a way that really hurts someone, in a sort of in an innuendo or some kind of implicit manner. So human speech is very sophisticated. So therefore, for practitioners particularly, paying attention to your speech, being mindful of your speech is considered very important, because that is an important part of a social life. Now, compared to speech, the mind, the mental world is even more complicated and complex. And in any case, both speech and bodily action, both of them, those that matter, morally significant actions of speech as well as physical action, really are coming from a state of mind, an intention or a motivation. So I think when we talk about bringing compassion and kindness in a school curriculum, I think the emphasis really has to be at the level of mind, intention, and motivation. So, for example, if we have the intention of compassion, then we will naturally choose words that is more constructive, that is more beneficial, that's less hurtful. So the intention and the motivation really defines the constructive or destructive nature of the action and of both speech and body.
Yeah, this is really enormously informative, Your Holiness, and we, I think, need to pay more attention to combining mind training with action in the programs that have been developed in education in the West. And so that's very, very helpful. So thank you. Dan?
Yes, I'd add that, Your Holiness, in talking about an education of the heart, you've often made a what I think is an incisive critique, which is that modern education, secular education, focuses on the material world, but does very little with our inner mind, our inner life. And for example, compassion is missing from the curriculum. And if you think about emotional hygiene, which is a term that you've used, how that could apply, I have a question for you about anger. You included anger as a destructive emotion, but anger comes, I'm thinking of Gandhi or Martin Luther King. They're angry at social injustice, but they use their anger. Can you tell us about how we can have what you might call a constructive anger?
And social injustice,
So this example of anger in the context of confronting injustice, societal injustice, but I would argue that actually one could confront these injustices quite effectively without anger, without resorting to anger, by using compassion. And also because many of the acts of injustice are really coming from a place of either ignorance or falling victim to destructive emotions or very discriminatory biased attitude on the part of the perpetrators, whose understanding of fellow human beings are lacking or wanting. So there's ample ground to really feel compassion for them. And also, in some ways, one could say that to save them from, further consequences of creating destruction. So, for example, in the case of Tibetans, we are fully cognizant of the injustices that is taking place back home in Tibet. Yet at the same time, we are trying to carry a struggle where we strive to ensure that we never lose sight of the humanity of the other side, always remembering the humanity of the other side. And whatever criticism or whatever resistance we offer, it is being offered from a place of wanting to be helpful to both sides. So clearly, yes, anger can be a powerful motivating factor, but one can also bring compassion as a powerful lens and motivating factor in dealing with injustice.
Thank you.
Your Holiness, models in psychology of genuine happiness often leave out morality, ethics. So my question is, what is the relationship between ethics and genuine happiness?
Ethics is kada shenliya panda shen never domya dita ethic kan ligruda.
So when we are talking about ethics, actually we are talking about our relationship with others. And ethics, in a nutshell or in a very basic level, is an action that involves refraining from harming others and, if possible, being helpful to others. So then, in a sense, is the central question of ethics. So if we take our understanding of ethics to be that way, then we can see the connection with happiness, because as social creatures, if we engage in actions that are harmful to others, not only does it bring harm to other fellow human beings, but also it undermines the basis for one's own well-being, one's own happiness. Whereas if we are bringing a sense of understanding, empathy and compassion for others, consideration of others' needs and well-being in our interaction and relationship with others, not only does it help others, but it also helps ourselves. So one could argue that you can use a self-referential argument, self-referential case to promote ethics from the perspective of personal well-being or personal happiness. So in this way, we can see a close connection between ethics and living an ethical life and living a happy a genuinely happy life.
패시두 때문에 라 destructive emotion 도 망쳐야지.
So, and also one distinction, important distinction that we can appreciate between positive versus destructive emotions is that in the case of destructive emotions, generally they tend to be much more impulsive, instinctual, reactive. If something triggers, we react. And they are not really grounded in any considerate response, engagement with whatever the situation is. Whereas if you look at more positive and constructive emotions like compassion, empathy, and love, and so on, then although they may arise naturally, but in fact, we can see that they can be grounded in reason, understanding of reality, and then they can be strengthened. So they tend to go more in tune with reality, whereas destructive emotions tend to be more reactive, instinctual, and not much basis of consideration.
Thank you, Your Holiness.
Your Holiness, this brings to mind the work that Paul Ekman did on the Atlas of Emotions. I know you encouraged, actually I think you even supported his work on mapping the full range of human emotion, the anger family, the sadness family, the joy family, and so on. Why do you think it might be helpful for us to understand the full range of human emotion? That's my question.
인지식 나라래야 나 삼르 지글로이 지 캡을 뿌리 멘다 여기디.
But the reason why I felt it was important is that partly given that the mind science is quite a new field in contemporary science, perhaps there is still a lot of scope and room for development of and refinement of the constructs, of the concepts. So because, for example, the word emotion is quite used liberally, and because we use the word emotion liberally, people seem to get the idea of some kind of monolithic sort of world which is called emotion, and everything is lumped in there. Whereas if you look at the Buddhist approach to understanding the mechanics of the mind, if you want, for example, in Abhidharma psychology, there is a whole classification of known as mental factors. These are the modalities functionally defined in ways in which the mind engages with the world. So there, for example, in one of the influential Abhidharma system, there's a list of 51 such mental factors. And within these mental factors, if you look at them, they are not only clearly defined, but their functions are identified. Their interrelationship with other mental factors are identified. Their behavioral expressions are identified. So there is a much more systematic approach, whereas if you compare that to the Western mind science, there doesn't seem to be a comparable systematic approach. So my hope was that when creating emotional atlas or emotion map, then we will be able to get using the contemporary psychology scientific language to fine-tune and come up with more differentiated way of understanding the human mind. And one of the interests that I have is for someone or a group of people to look at the Abhidharma list, 51 factors, and try to really do a research and tease out to see, by using Western terminology and classification like emotion, to see how many of those 51 can be put in the emotion camp and how many of them will not belong to that category. So those are work that could be interesting, that needs to be done.
Thank you.
Your Holiness, we're sensitive to the time, and if we can, we'd like to ask two more questions. One is, one of the ways that scientists study emotion today is to take advantage of the fact that we all have these phones that we carry around. And scientists have texted people and asked them many times a day for many days, how are you feeling right now, right at this moment? And they report the emotions that they're feeling. And so the question that we have for you, Your Holiness, is what are the emotions that predominate, that are more frequent in a person who exhibits genuine happiness? And a related question is, Your Holiness, if you might, can you talk about what emotions you experience yourself on a daily basis, mostly? What are the most common emotions?
간다 저와디 아주 많이 냐리야 예배 그도네 아메 삼로데 도시 시디주베이나.
So the one basic fact is really, once again, it has to do with our social nature. When we are talking about dominance of emotions in our life, we know from some scientific studies that the state of mother's mind has an impact on the unborn child. So the impact of others' affection or emotion or state of mind on becomes crucial right from a very early stage. And we know, for example, when the child is born, the first few months or years, nurturing relationship really lays the foundation for the emotional life of the child. So there, and from there, it really establishes the basis for the role of compassion, the role of love in our life. And so not only at the beginning of our birth, but also in middle life, as well as towards the end of our life, the role of compassion and love and affection remains very powerful. And we know that, for example, when we are the recipient of someone's affection, they are loving people around us, we feel more at ease, we feel more assured, we feel rested, secure. So, and then we know that even from, for example, if a loving person a loved one is dying, and the loved one is surrounded by truly loved ones who genuinely love this person, the dying person is able to let go and pass this life more easily, but at ease. On the other hand, if this is a person who hasn't been that nice towards others, and then at the time of death, maybe there are family members who are fighting about the inheritance and sort of with each other, and imagine the impact this will have on the mind of this dying person. So even when we are dying, others' affection, others' love matters to us. So that is really the foundation of our emotional life as a social creature. So therefore, making that emphasis and creating that kind of experience of affection, receiving affection, giving affection in our life is really the way to build a good, rich emotional, constructive emotional life. So this is when, on this point, there is no difference at all between religion and non-religion, different religions. It's really, we are talking about the fundamental human condition, the facts of human reality, facts of human existence.
Pero lobsung chebe koduliya gigen zinjenale gigengi.
So even in a classroom, when a formal subject is being taught, if the teacher shows kindness and a genuine sense of concern for the child's education, and the children feel secure in that classroom, the lesson they learn goes deeper. They actually pay attention. Whereas if the teacher may be knowledge-wise very competent, but if the teacher is not bringing human affection in the classroom and do not make that connection with the students, and then instead it creates a kind of a fearful atmosphere in the classroom, then this fearful state of mind prevents children from actually learning. So this is something that we can see from our own personal experience. So for example, if there's a teacher who's popular, who's kind and who's gentle and engaging, the children love going to that classroom. Whereas if the teacher is someone who's stern, cold, and in fact short-tempered, and loses temper, easily, then children, instead of looking forward to going to the classroom, the moment they have to go to that class, they feel as if the sun has set. so that's the a very natural human attitude and response.
Yeah, there's actually good scientific research that is very consistent with this, Your Holiness. So this is really a wonderful description. Thank you.
One final question, Your Holiness. It's along these lines. If we're social animals, and if warmth and warm-heartedness is so important, and if there's 7 billion people on the planet, given the oneness of humanity, how can we make the leap from loving people we care about and know to loving everyone?
这样的俺说让切数这话的也不切，但这里也希望个朝前呢，这话的价值的东西用出来的话。
So here the important thing is, as we spoke about earlier, the compassion is a natural human quality. This is something that we are biologically given. So the ability to have a sense of concern for others' well-being is there as a part of our natural inheritance. And yes, you're right, generally we tend to reserve it for a small circle of people. But here, when we are trying to expand the scope of this natural compassion, we need the aid of wisdom. And so here by wisdom, what I mean is to really use our rational thinking. For example, understanding, first of all, that just like myself, everybody on this earth wishes to be happy, do not want suffering. And furthermore, to really appreciate that, in this today's reality, the welfare and the interest of everybody is so intertwined. There is no longer a real basis for making hard differentiations of East versus West or South versus North. So the whole world is so interconnected and interdependent. So if we are serious about our own welfare and our own community's well-being, we need to take serious concern about the well-being of others. So this deep interconnectedness of today's reality is something that needs to be brought by understanding and wisdom. And also to appreciate that in the past, situation may have been different because countries and small tribes and communities may have been able to remain autonomous. So in those kind of situations, maybe there is a case to be made for not caring about what goes beyond your border. But in today's world, those kind of situations have completely changed. So this, I think, is an important point. And furthermore, from our own personal, from one's own personal well-being, the moment you are able to connect with someone at the basic human level, a shared human level, the awareness that just like myself, this person too wishes to be happy, do not want suffering. If we bring that awareness, then it really opens up a much more easy way of interacting with everybody. So in my own personal case, I had the privilege to travel extensively, and whenever I'm in a different place, different ethnic groups, different communities, different cultures, different languages, different religions, but I always relate first and foremost at the fundamental human level. I know at that level, on that level, just as myself, this person in front of me wishes to be happy, do not want suffering. So if I'm able to relate at that level, there is a sense of ease. There is a naturalness, and I can bring my best and bring the compassionate heart in that interaction. And the expression comes out in the form of a smiling, and humans smile towards other smiling human beings. That's a sort of a natural human response. So I think just using this kind of reasoning, this wisdom, there's clearly, there is a basis where the natural compassion can then be expanded to include, so that when we begin to use the word we, that we will cover everybody on this earth. So our sense of we and us really should cover the entire 7 billion human beings.
So now today, whole world is, as I mentioned earlier, east, west, north, south, all have to live together. So we should keep oneness of human being of this planet. We have to live together. So no longer fight each other. Senseless. Occasionally some sort of disagreement. Then through dialogue, you say try to solve, not through weapon. So thinking this line, you can really develop peaceful world, a demilitarized world. That should be our aim. So we all have common responsibility to build happy humanity on the basis of consider oneness of 7 billion human beings. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Holiness.
This is very beautiful, very profound, very helpful. On behalf of everyone, we want to thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.